2007, and the 26-year-old Fernando Alonso is already on the cusp of greatness. Because in winning the drivers and defeating the 7-time champion, the consensus GOAT Michael Schumacher, somehow Alonso had beaten the unbeatable.
Around the outside of the 130R corner, I've never seen anything like it.
But some said that 05 was just the fluke, that it was the best tyre championship more than the best drivers championship that year. And so in 06, Nando beat Schumi again. But for 07, the Spaniard would sign for McLaren alongside a rookie with a burgeoning reputation. His name, Lewis Hamilton.
Here at the McLaren headquarters in Woking, not only do they have the double world champion Fernando Alonso, but in 22-year-old Lewis Hamilton, they have one of the most exciting young talents to arrive on the British motorsport scene.
So Alonso for that year was, of course, a hot favourite alongside Messrs Raikkonen and Massa. In stark contrast, Lewis was a rank outsider at 14-1. He had no chance. The big question on everybody's lips this year wasn't if Alonso would beat Lewis, but how much would he beat him by? Experts gave him no chance. But what no one knew is that Lewis had other ideas, because he was about to put together the greatest rookie season in all of F1 history.
You know, I'm a racer. I'll keep pushing right into the end. And oh, look at that! Absolutely four-wheel drifting.
Hamilton is definitely going to extend his lead over Alonso. And Heifeld's attacking Hamilton. Alonso goes to the outside. Has he made it? He's run wide. He's cut the corner. If he takes the advantage, which he can't, he's done what he did in Spain. Hamilton, we've got yellow flags in the back. Hamilton's had some manners put on him by Kubica, but he comes round the outside. He's also gone round Alonso. Lewis Hamilton wins! The world is at his feet.
All told, Lewis was a pit stop away from winning the Drivers' Championship that year. Critically though, he'd go on to beat his McLaren teammate. Though the two finished level on points, the Brit would finish ahead of Alonso by virtue of the fact that he had more second place finishes. Conventional wisdom is that Alonso is to blame for losing to rookie Hamilton, but you know, I think this is worth revisiting. And so in this video, we're going to make the case for Alonso and look at the top 5 reasons why you can't blame Alonso for losing to Hamilton in 07. Truth is, McLaren absolutely mismanaged their driver pairing. Ron Dennis's mantra has always been to get the 2 quickest drivers and put them in his car. And whilst that looks very nice on paper and is of course fantastic for sponsors, in practice, it can be a bit problematic.
Oh my goodness! Turn 2, his teammates got the inside line, they've touched again!
Oh, yeah, they come together!
It was incumbent then on Dennis's McLaren to manage this relationship with clearly outlined rules of engagement and consequences for infractions. But as the season developed, it was clear for all to see that these simply weren't in place. Whether in Monaco, where Lewis ignored team orders without compunction or ramification, or in Hungary quali, where Lewis refused an order to let Alonso overtake.
However, he failed to let Fernando pass, despite requests from the team and the obvious anger of his teammate.
Alonso's revenge? Deliberately impeding Lewis and preventing him from getting a final hot lap in.
There's Lewis Hamilton queuing up behind him.
Those rather strange delays before you went out for both runs, was that your decision or the team holding you back?
Is he blocking Hamilton here? Is that a bit of a tactic?
Thing was holding me back.
And the chaos doesn't even stop there, because Alonso would demand that Lewis was short fueled for the race. And if Dennis didn't comply, well, Alonso was going to have a word with the FI and reveal that McLaren were in possession of confidential Ferrari info. You guessed it, Spygate. I mean, talk about intra-team chaos. And to think all of this could have so easily been avoided with simple guardrails around driver hierarchy. Because as part of Alonso's contract, Dennis had assured the Spaniard that he'd be the #1 driver. Alonso wouldn't have signed but for that. Unbeknownst to both of them, however, sat on the opposite side of the gauge was a GP2 winner who was about to redefine what it meant to be an F1 rookie. The biggest scandal that F1's ever seen happened to McLaren that year, as if the drivers needed any more drama to contend with. It centred around confidential Ferrari information that had found its way into McLaren hands. For McLaren, what resulted was a trial, a $100 million fine and a disqualification from the constructors. But for Alonso, there were accusations of cheating. There were emails between him and McLaren test driver Pedro de la Rosa evidencing as much. Now, Fernando's not the type of man to talk openly about his emotions, but the burden of this, it was real. And critically, Alonso was made a scapegoat of, much more so than ever was Hamilton. And when you're in a dogfight for the Drivers' Championship with your teammate, CPU is currency. The ability to dial up that singularity of focus, being Alonso's superpower. But at McLaren, now with Spygate and a potential DQ to think about, Fernie was fighting too many fires outside of the cockpit to be effective inside of it. And this was borne out in his performance, because after Spygate, Fernie would only go on to win one Grand Prix. The McLaren of 07 was a peculiar outfit of a team, straight-laced, corporate, clean-shaven. And if we're being honest, Fernando Alonso, for all his gifts behind the wheel, was anything but that. The swashbuckling Spaniard was a force of nature at Renault, but he was that if only because he had a team around him who loved him. They worshipped the ground that he walked on. Mild 7 Renault fit Alonso like a glove, because despite all their success, an underdog outfit is what they were. Ron Dennis's McLaren, an underdog outfit they were not. And let's state the obvious, because as a Spaniard joining a very British team in McLaren, there were cultural differences, irreconcilable ones. Trying to fit Fernando Alonso into a clean-shaven box just isn't the way to get the best out of him. At Renault, it was the Fernando show. He was the star. But at McLaren, he was just one cog of many in a well-oiled F1 machine. Pre-season, Alonso didn't show up to a McLaren team building camp. This wasn't looked very favourably upon and would set the tone for the rest of his time there. Under Dennis's stewardship, the two-time champion was unsupported, isolated, and he knew this and would try to solve for it by any means necessary. Plus, Lewis was always Ron Dennis's prodigy. 2 Brits, a British team, Lewis was the guy. And Dennis saying that our race is with Alonso and not the guys over at Ferrari tells you all you need to know. I mean, Dennis was lenient with Lewis and his indiscretions at Monaco and Hungary, and seen through the lens of the prodigal son. Makes sense. And that's a strong bond for even a 2-time champion to contend with. Insurmountable, some will say. So strong were the cries of bias and foul play from Alonso's camp. At the season finale at Interlagos, they requested that FIA stewards come and check the McLaren garage to ensure that there was no malfeasance. Oh, the humanity. F1 is a story told in tenths, a sport decided on fine margins, so you're going to need lady luck if you're to even win a race, let alone a championship. And throughout his career, the racing gods haven't been awfully kind towards Fernando Alonso. I mean, to think that but for 8 points, he'd be a 5-time instead of 2-time champion. And 2007 was no exception. To say that Alonso was unlucky that year is an understatement. Don't believe me? Let me show you. In 07, Bridgestone became F1's tyre provider of choice. Only a year earlier in GP2, Lewis had been racing on those tyres. Lewis then was used to the characteristics of those Bridgestone tyres from the get-go. Alonso, by stark contrast, he'd need more time, having raced only on the Michelins the years prior. The Spaniard had gearbox issues that cost him dearly in France. Not to mention the 5-place grid penalty that he got in Hungary, which was harsh at best, egregious at worst. Unless we forget he was unlucky not to finish at Suzuka. Let's say one of those incidents doesn't happen, just one, and Alonso has more than enough points not just to beat Lewis, but to become champion that year. No one saw Lewis Hamilton coming. He was this irrepressible force of nature who never for 1 second doubted just how brilliant he was going to be. This chap, he'd come to take names, and he was in a hurry too. I mean, this chap's ability to go wheel to wheel was unlike anything we've ever seen out of a rookie.
Here comes Hamilton 3 wide into Maggers. Is it going to work? Yes, it is. And Hamilton wins. And Piquet's on the grass.
I mean, he was outrageously aggressive, but just with none of the downside or the clumsiness that you'd expect to see from a newbie.
I went to Fernando and I said, Fernando, by the way, I've decided to put Lewis in the car. And he thought for a moment and he said, "Don't you want to win the Constructors?" Meaning that he didn't feel that Lewis was going to be much of a threat or much of a points scorer.
So Fernando was blindsided by this because he dramatically underestimated his rookie teammate, as had everybody else. Fernando would spend much of the rest of the season realigning his expectations, adapting the way he races. And where only 2 years before Fernando had been the disruptor, he'd been the young gun to drive Schumacher off into early retirement. Now though, the shoe was on the other foot. Now Lewis was the disruptor. He was the new kid on the block. And whilst all that stuff was tough for Alonso to deal with, toughest amongst Lewis Hamilton's traits was the great equaliser in F1. Speed. Lewis was just lights out quick, and from race 1, Lewis would drop it on pole 5 times to Alonso's 3 that season, with an average qualifying position of 2.65 to Alonso's 2.88. And you only need look at Fuji to see that his race pace was none too shabby either. There in wet conditions, he made seasoned pros look like amateurs. And I do wonder sometimes what happened to that Lewis fella. All that unfulfilled potential, eh? And there it is. Those are your top 5 reasons why you can't blame Alonso for losing to Hamilton. And if you enjoyed that one, you'll love this one on why you can't blame Michael Massey for AD21.